For the next 5 weeks, we're going to talk about love. Our comments will be, our springboard will be a book that I recommend. It's a book stood the test of time, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Been around since the early 90s. And its sense is how to express heartfelt commitment to your mate. Some of the principles here don't just apply within marriage, though. Families and friendships, some good material. We'll use this as a springboard to talk not only about expressing love to one another, but how God uses each of these 5 languages that we'll review and look at one of them today. God uses these languages in expressing love to us, so we will use that to talk about love this way and love this way. When we think about love, some things that we have to say about it. Naturally, love is important. Every child has certain basic emotional needs that must be met if he or she is to be emotionally stable. None is more basic than the need for love and affection. And what a child needs is the sense that the child belongs and belongs because the child is wanted. With an adequate supply of affection, the child will grow up to be a responsible adult. Without an adequate amount of affection, the love tank becomes empty and the child's development suffers. Love is important, but love is also elusive. As we grow up then and we move out of the home, out of parents and the mother and father's love, we look for love elsewhere. And we look in marriage. And marriage becomes a place where we discover love again. However, it can be not all that we hoped it would be within marriage. Oftentimes you can hear couples, you've had friends, the divorce rate would indicate that we don't always find what we're looking for. You hear things like this: our love is gone, our relationship is dead. We used to feel close, but not now. We no longer enjoy being with each other. We don't meet each other's needs anymore. The love that was sought proved to be elusive. And the interesting thing is that it seemed to be so strong in the beginning. In the beginning of any kind of love, especially romantic love, we might call it infatuation, which is the beginning of any type of marriage relationship. It's what begins, but it doesn't always last. In the beginning, love seems almost an obsession, but what Gary Chapman would indicate is that love is not an obsession. When we think of falling in love, they've done research and indicating that the average lifespan of romantic obsession, of the sense that, that I go where it's just we're all wrapped up in one another, Google eyes, you're my widow wookums, and all those kind of needy things, that lasts about 2 years. That's the average lifespan of a romantic obsession, being in love. It lasts a couple of years. Eventually, we all descend from the clouds and plant our feet on earth again. You've heard it says, when your heart's on fire, smoke gets in your eyes. And after 2 years, the smoke clears. I never saw that before. What in the world? And it's those things that we couldn't see. Now we see. Not only do we see them, but they are really irritating. We recognize that his or her personality traits are actually irritating. At one point, they were cute. Boy, I love the way you do that little thing. And now I don't like the way you do that little thing. Her behavior patterns are annoying. Gary Chapman writes, the euphoria of the in-love state gives us the illusion that we have an intimate relationship. We feel that we belong to each other. We believe we can conquer all problems. We feel altruistic toward one another, that we want to do good things towards one another. As one young man said about his fiancée, I cannot conceive of doing anything to hurt her. My only desire is to make her happy. I would do anything to make her happy, he writes. Such obsessions give us the false sense that our egocentric attitudes have been eradicated. We have become a sort of Mother Teresa, willing to give anything for the benefit of the lover. The reason we can do that so freely is that we sincerely believe that our lover feels the same way towards us. We believe that she is or he is committed to meeting our needs, that she loves us as much as we love him or her and would never do anything to hurt us. That thinking is always fanciful. Right. Not that we are insincere in what we think and feel. We're not insincere, he writes, but we are unrealistic. We fail to reckon with the reality of human nature. By nature, we are egocentric. Our world revolves around us. None of us is totally giving to another person. The euphoria of the in-love experience only gives us the illusion. Once the experience of falling in love has run its natural course, which is about 2 years, we will return to the world of reality and begin to assert ourselves. Little by little, the illusion of intimacy evaporates. The individual desires, emotion, thoughts, and behavior patterns exert themselves. Now we have two individuals. Their minds have not melted together. Their emotions mingled briefly in the ocean of love, but now the waves of reality begin to separate them. They fall out of love. And he writes, and at that point they withdraw, separate, divorce, and set off in search of a new in-love experience, or they begin the hard work of learning to love each other without the euphoria of the in-love obsession. He writes, our most basic emotional need is not to fall in love, but to be genuinely loved by another, to know a love that grows out of reason and choice, not instinct. I need to be loved by someone who chooses to love me, who sees in me something worth loving. That kind of love requires effort and discipline. It is the choice to expend energy in an effort to benefit the other person, knowing that if his or her life is enriched by your effort, you too will find a sense of satisfaction, the satisfaction of having genuinely loved another. It does not require the euphoria of the in-love experience. And this is good news or bad news. If you're under the illusion that the euphoria of the in-love experience lasts, this is bad news. If, however, you are a couple and the euphoria of the in-love experience is not there and you think there's something wrong, this is great news. Here's what he goes on to say. In fact, true love cannot begin until the in-love experience has run its course. It's a strong statement. True love can't exist until the obsessional in-love, falling in love experience and illusion has run its course. It's not to say that that's wrong. You might think of what happens when they fire the shuttle into outer space. The initial stage of that requires a booster rocket that propels the shuttle up out of the atmosphere. But what happens when the shuttle reaches and escapes the orbit? Do they keep on flying on the basis of the fuel in that booster rocket? No, it falls away. And it's got to be replaced by another fuel source, and that's what happens. It's the same thing in relationships. It's not that the falling in love obsession is not right. God creates things that way, but it just doesn't last. It can't be the fuel by which we continue to move towards one another in a loving way. We cannot take credit for the kind and generous things we do while under the influence of the obsession. Love is important, elusive, not an obsession, and it's a verb. Love is a verb. When we think about love, the Bible would, when it talks about it, doesn't describe love as something we fall in and out of, not something that overwhelms us and is a thing that we enter. It's not a thing. It's not something that overwhelms us. It's something we do. We're commanded to love. I think you'd agree with me. You can't command somebody to have an obsession. And sometimes couples will separate because, I'm sorry, hon, I'm just not in love with you anymore, which means the obsession is gone, and I can't command it to come. When love is a noun, it's something you can fall into or out of, but biblically it's not. It's a verb. And love is associated with words. When you love somebody, there are words, some words you say. We'll talk about that today. There's time that you give. There are gifts and service and touch. In fact, what the writer would suggest is that part of the problem is when somebody who has one love language, which they understand and which they try to give, but their partner speaks another language. So I might be really touched by words, but if you are really touched by gifts, then I will give my words to you, talk about how much I love you. But if that's not your primary language, you're saying, yeah, that's fine, But like the mamas and the papas used to think, words of love so soft and tender won't win a girl's heart anymore. You do remember that song, don't you? Mamas and the papas, does that ring any kind of bell anywhere? Okay, I'm not going to even pursue that, I guess. Talk about words that love. Words that love, and again, words that love, because love is a verb. And when you love, the way you love is you speak words, because in speaking words you are loving. So words are not just, I love you. Loving words are not just words that have love in them. In fact, words that love do two things. They build up and they spur on. See, words of love, again, are not just words that you say that contain the word love, like I just said. Sometimes the words that love, well, what they need to become are words that focus on what builds the other person up. And if I speak to you words that build you up, I am loving you with words. If I speak to you words that spur you on, I am loving you with words. Words that build up. A woman came to Dr. Chapman and indicated, I've got a problem. I can't get my husband to paint our bathroom. Been after him for 9 months. I've tried everything I know. Can't get him to paint it. Last Saturday was a great example. You remember how pretty it was. Do you know what my husband did all day long? He washed and waxed the car. So he said, so what did you do? I went out there and said, Bob, I don't understand you. Today would have been a perfect day to paint the bedroom, and here you are washing and waxing the car. So did he paint the bedroom, I inquired? No, it's still not painted. I don't know what to do. He said, let me ask you a question. Are you opposed to clean wax cars? No, but I want the bedroom painted. He said, are you certain your husband knows that you want the bedroom painted? I know he does, she said. I've been after him for 9 months. He said, let me ask you one more question. Does your husband ever do anything good? Like what? Oh, like taking the garbage out, or getting bugs off the windshield of the car you drive, or getting gas in the car, or paying the electric bill, or hanging up his coat. Yes, she said, he does some of those things. Then I have 2 suggestions. These were his suggestions. 1, don't ever mention painting the bedroom again. I repeat it. Don't ever mention it again. I don't see how that's going to help, she said. He said, look, you just told me what he knows. He knows that you want the bedroom painted. You don't have to tell him anymore. He already knows. The second suggestion I have is that the next time your husband does anything good, give him a compliment. If he takes the garbage out, say, Bob, I want you to know I really appreciate you taking the garbage out. Don't say, about time you took the garbage out, the flies were going to carry it out for you. Every time he does something good, give him a verbal compliment. I don't see how that's going to get the bedroom painted. I said, you asked for my advice, you have it, it's free. She wasn't very happy with me when she left, he says. 3 weeks later, however, she came back to my office and said it worked. She had learned that verbal compliments are far greater motivators than nagging words. It's not just a way to get what you want. Verbal flattery is a way to prize somebody. But it is true that when we receive affirming words, we're far more likely to be motivated to reciprocate and do something our spouse desires. Bible, if you look and see the verse, it indicates under point 1, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. You know what's interesting when you come to this whole thing about loving words? This is a command. You can't command somebody to have a feeling. That's why when the Bible commands us to love, it commands these kinds of things. Don't let any unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only words that are beneficial for building somebody up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And this is not a suggestion, it's a command. Some of us find words difficult, and at the end I'm going to indicate, don't start with thinking that you're going to do something every day. However, for those of us for whom words are more difficult, perhaps because we didn't get a lot of words, it's not optional. It's something that we want to move in the direction of. And again, the words that are loving words are not just words that say, I love you. It's words that build another person up. The love that is commanded, again, can be, when the Bible talks about loving, it says we're to love those who really aren't the same side as we are. It can't be feeling-based. Here's what becomes confusing. when we say hurtful things that tear down a person and then follow it up by saying, remember that I love you. Yeah, but remember that I love you. Wait, you know what the Bible would say? Well, you just didn't love them. See, love is a verb. I love you. I have feelings for you. What the Bible would say, fine, the feelings are fine. But that's not what's commanded. What's commanded is don't let any unwholesome word come out of your mouth. Only as good as is building the other person. So what ended up happening right there in that interchange, you were not loving them. And what the Bible would indicate, give people words that love. Words that tear down are not words that love. Confusion comes when you get one thing and you don't know what to believe. You know, again, some of us have been in these places. I imagine all of us have. That we heard one thing, but we felt another thing. You're saying you love me, but why are you doing that? And there's some real confusion that's created by that. Not just words that love, but words that spur on. Chapman writes, most of us have more potential than we will ever develop. What holds us back is often courage. Encouraging words might be difficult for you to speak. Some of us were raised in homes that were very encouraging. And we were always being told things that spurred us on, that built us up. And we have a large vocabulary of words to give. Some of us don't have that. Words were spare in our home. Or they were always words that were critical. And if you haven't been encouraged a lot, it's oftentimes hard to summon the words or to summon the motivation to give the words. Some of us struggle with that. What Chapman writes is, it may take great effort for you to learn this language. If the language of words is not your primary language or you're not good at it, it might take great effort for you to learn this language. That will be especially true if you have a pattern of critical and condemning words. And if you look at those who have a pattern of critical, condemning words, it's that's what they receive. That's not justification. It's not an excuse. It is a reason. Correct? It's not an excuse, but it is a reason. And what the Bible would indicate is, say things to encourage. Well, look what the verse indicates. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward loving good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another. The word for encourage literally means to call somebody to your side. It's from two words, from and call. So call from to a side. And here is the image of someone going in a direction where they are going to do something that would be loving, something that would be the kind of thing that Jesus would want them to do, the kind of thing that God does. And they are tired. You call that person and you say something that spurs them on to continue to walk. In Christian circles, you hear a lot about accountability, which is you call a person, you look at what they're doing, you say, you're doing that wrong. And again, we've talked about this. The biblical word for what we do with one another is not accountability. Now, I'm not blowing that up. If you've got an accountability relationship, okay, it might be semantics. What I am saying is that the biblical word, the accountability is the God word. He holds us accountable because He can hold us accountable at the level of heart. And that's what God's concerned about, is motives. I can't hold you accountable for your motives because I can't see them. I'm not God. So what we do with one another, the Bible word for one another stuff is encourage. Encourage, which is to come alongside a person and to influence them to keep going in the way that's truly best for them. It's not accountability. Accountability is when I stand and look and assess. Encouragement is I don't face that person. I come alongside them. Encouragement is alongside. It's, come on, you can keep, that's encouragement. And I'll walk with you. Let's keep, you see the difference? And that's the one another word. That's what we're supposed to do, encourage one another. And what ends up happening, what's happening in this church where these things are being written, there are some people who are just, they can't make it work. They are not excited about being Christians. Those who are making it work are doing this. They're leaving them. They're not encouraging them, they're judging them. Okay, yeah, don't come to church. Yeah, fine. We who are strong, and what he says, don't leave them alone. Don't judge them. Come alongside. Come on. There's some things that happen. There's some encouragement that you can... Oh, encouragement? Yeah, that's what we really want to do. It's like what you saw last week with the skit, with the lights. There's some people encouraging one another. Somebody afraid. And it says, get that person, bring them in. That's what we're supposed to do. Again, it's hard to get what we haven't received, and that's why we need to talk about gaining greater fluency. Again, some of us are fluent. We're fluent in one language, either words or time. Some of you are really good at giving time to another person. Some of you, acts of service, you can do things and projects, some for touch that comes so naturally. Gifts, some of you are great card givers. And all of us, we have a language. But you might be connected with somebody whose language is words, or for all of us, we need to be able to speak. Gaining greater fluency, how do we do that? Number one, listen. It's hard to give what you haven't received. And again, this is a reason, not an excuse. If you came from a very critical and loving home, you're not going to be as good at giving encouraging verbal words to people as somebody that was a natural part of language at home. It's going to feel unnatural. You feel resentful. I didn't get those words. I'm not going to give them to you. It seems that we tend to cyclically pass on the things that we receive. If I live in a home that was dismissive, that didn't give me a lot of words, the normal thing for me then is when things are crisis that you don't say anything to anyone. You go to your room. Then you're going to make your own family. And when the tension comes, our elastic band will still pull us away or to attack. It's hard to pass on something that you haven't received. That's not to say it's not possible to move in the direction of being more fluent in the language of words. Change is possible. It begins, though, I would suggest, with listening. And I think this is where God comes in. God is really good at being loving and encouraging. We're going to look at some verses very quickly. God is really good at this. For God, loving is something that is done without breaking a sweat. Look what it says. Some of the verses, let's just read through a couple. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort. The word for comfort there is encouragement. God is the God of all encouragement. If you find somebody saying something to someone that comforts and encourages them, I have a good friend who's wonderful at this. And when you see that, ultimately, God is the source of all encouragement. You trace it back, and it came from God. Why? God's great at encouragement. That's what He's like. God is not only encouraging, He is verbal. He's verbal. It is in God's nature to be self-revealing and to say things to people. Some of us are not very verbal. We're not very self-revealing. We are more mysterious. We stay to ourselves. We're introspective. Some of us are very outside. We wear our emotions on our sleeve. Everyone can know because everything's right there. Some of us are more veiled, more careful. We're harder to know. God, fortunately, is both. He is not able to be known fully yet. We see in the mirror dimly. But we will see face to face. And I'll tell you this. I would bet with you, but I don't think I'll be able to collect on the bet in heaven. When you meet God, you're going to like Him. I mean, not just love Him. I mean, like Him. You're going to say, I never knew. I didn't think you were like this. I always thought it was this, and now I see it's that. I never thought I'd feel this with you. I thought I'd feel distant, like I needed to get away. When you see God, you're not going to feel like you need to get away from Him. You're going to feel like, this is what I was made for. Anyways. God is, look what it says. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. We have seen His glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus is God, called the Word of God. Why does God have a Word? Why would God call His Son the Word? What does that tell you about God? If God exists in the form of the Son and the Father and the Holy Spirit, and God would have us know that His Son can be called the Word, what does that tell us about the God? That He cares about words. He reveals Himself. The reason why I speak words is because I want to tell you something. And what we know about God then is God is self-revealing. How do I know? He called His Son the Word. And He wants to let you know what He's like. In fact, that's why Jesus came. Not just to talk about God, but to reveal God. God said, I'm going to tell you what I'm like, and it's going to be way better than a hologram. Woof! And He appeared in a manger. He says, that's my Word, look, because that's me. And look what it says. In the past, God spoke to our forefathers. Why did He do that? Because God is always speaking. He spoke a universe, and the universe exists because the speaking voice continues to have power. He said, and it was so, and it is still so, because He spoke it into being. In the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, He has spoken to us through His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, and through whom He made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of His nature. In Jesus Christ, God clearly reveals Himself. God did not clearly reveal Himself as clearly prior to Jesus Christ coming. And if there is an impression of God formed by the Old Testament, that impression is formed because God exists in shadow form. A shadow can tell you some things. We've done this before. There's a shadow. I don't know if you can see it. I can see my shadow. I can tell some things about me. I can't tell you from that shadow whether I'm smiling. I can't see my eyes. In the Old Testament, God is a shadow. We can tell some things about Him. In Jesus Christ, God steps out into the light. Now we can see a face. Now we can see expression. We can see character. We can see with clarity. What is God like? He's like Jesus. God's speaking to us, telling us what He's like. And if there's a disparity between, well, I read that God's there, but now in Jesus, Jesus clearly reveals the character of the Father, brings it into clear focus. What does God want to tell us? It says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. But God has revealed it to us by His Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the man's spirit within him? Some of you would say, gosh, maybe let's stick with men. This might be a generalization. Would you say that men are harder to know than women? Maybe not. Anyways, let's take it from the guy perspective. How would you know about somebody? If you could talk to a person's spirit, that thing which exists before it gets filtered and before it gets cut off, before we filter it and close it off, the man's spirit within him knows about what the person thinks. And it's saying the same thing here. God is mysterious, but His Spirit is in touch with the deep things that God wants to communicate. Goes on in the verse to say, the Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the man's spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us. What God wants to tell us through His Spirit are the things that He thinks deep inside. What are those things? Things that He freely gives us. I think that's what God speaks to us. Words that build us up and spur us on. That's what the Spirit wants to tell us about. And here are the words that the Spirit uses. We've just talked about them the last 4 weeks. The Spirit would tell you this. You have someone to care. And you have somewhere to belong. and you have something to offer. Can I suggest to you that those are words that build up and spur on? Why are they words? Because that's what He does. He tells us words that build us up individually and as a body. And if you'll take those in and understand that is what God is telling you. Why? Because God loves and He speaks to us words that build us up and spur us on. You have someone to care. That's what He sent His Spirit to tell you. You have somewhere to belong. You are part of a large enterprise, and you have something to offer. And if you believe that, I would suggest that you would believe you're loved. Why? Because those words are loving words. God is really great. He's loving. God, I grew up so much of my life being afraid of Him because I didn't know Him. The more I know, the more I want to be with Him. The more I know of God, the more I love Him. I still have my stuff, all of us do. But the clearer I see Him, the more drawn I am to Him. And I never thought it would be that way. I thought the more I knew Him, the smaller my life would become. I really did. When I was first a Christian. But now I know, the more I know Him, the larger my heart becomes. It's really surprising. It's a cool thing. Gaining greater fluency. Listen to what He wants to say and learn. Learn to ask rather than demand. Chapman says, love makes requests, not demands. When I demand things from my spouse, I become my parent, and my spouse becomes the child. That's what you do with a child. You demand. Make your bed. Do the dishes. And in the context of parent-child, that's appropriate at some level. Less appropriate between equals, Chapman would suggest. If we wish to love each other, we need to know what the other person wants. So we need to know one another's wants and desires. What he says, though, the way we express those desires is all important. The way we express our desires to one another is as important as the fact that we are expressing the desires. To express our desires in a do this, demanding way removes the possibility of love, Chapman would suggest. He says if they come across as demands, we have erased the possibility of intimacy and will drive our spouse away. If, however, we make known our needs and desires as requests, we are giving guidance, not ultimatums. A request involves the element of choice. Your mate may choose to respond to your request or to deny it, because love is always a choice. That's what makes it meaningful. He says, to know that my spouse loves me enough to respond to one of my requests communicates emotionally that she or he cares about me, respects me, admires and wants to do something to please me. He says, we cannot get love by way of demand. You cannot get love by way of demand, because that's what you get is not love, it's compliance. And it might for a little bit feel good, but it will not meet the deep needs of our hearts. It can't. My spouse may in fact comply with my demands, but it is some other emotion like guilt or fear, but it's not love. Thus, a request creates the possibility for an expression of love, whereas a demand suffocates that possibility. Learn to ask rather than demand. Learn to appreciate rather than complain. Chapman tells a story about Bob and Betty Jo, who went to seminar after seminar in order to try to cause the negative spiral of their marriage to reverse field. Hadn't found anything. So Dr. Chapman tells a story in his book, and it's what he told them. The key is to express verbal appreciation for the things you like about the other person, and for the moment suspend your complaints. He said, twice a week, select one positive trait. Twice a week. One positive trait, express verbal appreciation for it to the spouse. So that was thing number one. Twice a week. And those of us for whom words are not that easy, I think this is doable. Twice a week. He says, take one positive trait and express verbal appreciation for it to the spouse. You do that. Twice a week. If you do that, you'll be loving. Gave one further guideline, told the woman that if Bill happened to give her a compliment, she was not to give him a compliment at the same time, but rather should simply receive it and say, thank you for saying that. So if you're married, the husband gives the wife a compliment, the wife can't do it right then. She says, thanks. She has to do it another time. Otherwise it comes, okay, you don't sweat much for a fat guy. Okay. So... That's why I don't listen to the tapes. I said, why in the world did you say that? It's not written here. Okay. Anyway, she told the husband the same thing. Encouraged them to do that every week for 2 months. If they found it helpful, they could continue. If the experiment didn't help, it didn't change the emotional climate, he said that they could get rid of it. Ended up making a difference in his life. Real huge difference. And she liked it. But she didn't like it as much because that wasn't her primary love language. Time was. That's what we'll talk about next week. We come to the table, though. This is really what this talks about. God demonstrates His own love for us. This isn't the sum total of His love. It's not that He dies for us, but the death is an indication of the intensity of His love. So as you come to the table, know that represents the intensity to which He would say to you, listen to me. You have someone to care. How do I know I have someone to care? Because I did this to tell you. You have somewhere to belong. How do I know? Because I did this to tell you. You have something to offer. How do I know? That sounds good. Because I did this to tell you it. Sometime during the course of the next songs, come up, take the juice and the bread. And as you do so, thank Him. Thank you that you love me. That because you love me, I have someone to care. And somewhere to belong. And something to offer. I just want to tell you, and you talk to Him sometime during the course of the next song. Take the juice and the bread. Take it and thank Him for His love and the thing that He did to show you its intensity. So that He could tell you things that would build you up, spur you on.